Yuriko of the Tiger's Shadow is one of the few commanders in this format that have the potential of actually making a aggro deck viable for cEDH. The reason is quite simple. Whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to an opponent, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost. With something like Emrakul inside your deck, that is gonna be 13 loss of life. And Yuriko only really needs to deal 40 loss of life to kill all opponents, regardless of how many multiplayer opponents in this free-for-all format you have. Perforos, God of the Forge, is another example of a commander like that, doing the exact same thing but in a different way. Yuriko of the Tiger's Shadow has some big advantages to Perforos, God of the Forge, however. She is a little bit more pesky to deal with. She comes into play without really increasing her commander tax because of commander ninjutsu. And she also have better color identities. Blue and black is better than only red, for sure. But also, Perforos, God of the Forge demands that you play a lot of creature cards in some way, creature cards that produce tokens, preferably. What you actually want to have with Perforos is hate bears, while with Yuriko, she will deal damage with counterspells that you flip from top of your deck. It doesn't matter what kind of card Yuriko is flipping and revealing, just the big CMC cost. That's what Yuriko is looking for. And once again, that is why Emrakul of the Promised End for 13 mana is inside this deck, but also why Scroll Rack is inside this deck. So here is the very simple trick. You attack with Yuriko, the trigger is on the stack to flip a card, you activate Scroll Rack, put Emrakul on top of your deck, and then draw a card with Scroll Rack. And then Yuriko's triggered ability, Resolve, you flip and reveal Emrakul, each opponent lose 13 life, and you draw Emrakul from your deck and put it into your hand. And next combat step, you're probably going to repeat this if everything goes according to your plan. And this should be able to burn your opponents down reasonably quick. But I'm also looking at Emrakul the Promised End as a secondary WINCON, a combo piece that can't be countered, only stifled from your hand. And a one-card combo that can't be counterspelled is actually rather good. The thing we're gonna do, and the aim, is to target an opponent that we predict is going to win with his combo the coming turn. And we try to win with his combo on his turn. And I want to emphasize that what I'm actually talking about and trying to do here is rather difficult. Maybe one of the most hard things you can attempt to do in this format. Because what it requires is that you know potentially everything about every single cEDH deck out there. And just by looking at a commander, you will instantly know how that deck is going to win and what combo that deck is actually playing. But then you also need to predict that they are going to win on their coming turn. So if you cast this on a turn that they are not going to win, then nothing will happen and you will fail. So you actually need to predict when they are going to win, which is rather difficult. But if you have that skill and if you have a deck that is able to hard cast this thing from your hand in the right timing, then you have a one-card combo that can't be counterspelled, and that is rather good. Now it is ridiculous to try and cast this mind-slavey creature for 13 mana, but Emrakul the Promised End cost 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard. So what we need is a deck that is filled with some fetch lands that will move themselves to the graveyard, instants and sorceries, a good quantity of those, both of them, then artifacts, enchantments, and creature cards. Well, we could include maybe some planeswalker, but I don't think we're gonna do that. Also there's this tribal, but there's no really good amount of tribal cards, so we're gonna leave tribal and planeswalker out. But if you have all these 6 different card types in your graveyard, Emrakul of the Promised End is gonna cost 7 mana instead. And that is a lot better. So how I am going to build this Yuriko deck is a deck focused at making this Japanese lady operate and going strong forward in a snowbally effect. Playing the typical one-drop flying or unblockable creature cards to make Yuriko come into play on turn 2 and smash face and draw a card and flip damage. But also a deck filled with all different card types to make Emrakul possibly 7 mana to cast. Let's begin with looking at the lands. Here are the 7 fetch lands that will either fetch an island or a swamp or maybe both with polluted delta, which are pretty much auto-included in this deck, regardless of what strategy we're gonna play. And this will put a land card inside your graveyard. But I am also adding in Cabal Pit. A good land comes into play untapped, taps for black mana. Treasure Hold. If you have 7 or more cards inside your graveyard, Cabal Pit gains this ability. 1 black mana, tap it and sacrifice Cabal Pit. This will now put a land card inside your graveyard. Target creature gets -2/-2. It's a decently good interaction. A land that can be used as a spot removal. We also have this blue version, the same thing, Treasure Hold. This one taps for blue mana, but if you sacrifice this thing, you will draw 3 cards and then discard 3 cards. That is actually good. A good way of looting through your deck and finding new better cards, throwing away trash, cards that you don't need in this situation. And finally, one more thing, Mox Diamond will also help us putting lands inside a graveyard. With Yuriko, we're going to be drawing a lot of cards and getting free to cast things by sacrificing hand size by discarding a card is fine. Mox Diamond is probably an auto include anyway, regardless of what Yuriko deck strategy you're going for. And this is going to give us 10 different cards that will help us out putting land cards inside a graveyard. And this is also, by the way, an artifact. So if this ends up in the graveyard, it helps out with artifact part 2. Next up, instant. I don't think instants are gonna be difficult, but I might as well talk a little bit about mana drain. Mana drain will give us a tremendous amount of mana, or well, maybe 3 mana or 4 mana or something about that. But that will definitely help out hard casting Emrakul on your upcoming turn, if you have Emrakul in your hand, that is, and if it is the right timing. But mana drain is actually quite good and should be auto included anyway. It is basically just a better version of Counterspell. Now Yuriko have a lot of instants inside her deck, but I did mention that I was going to make a deck focused around Yuriko as well. So look here, 5 mana for Force of Will. If Yuriko flip into this, that is 5 loss of life to all opponents. The same with Misdirect. Negate is good, play Negate, 2 mana and 2 life loss. This is a good trap. It's free to cast if someone is putting a lot of cards inside a graveyard, and it's 4 loss of life to all opponents. I'm also including this thing, a very expensive and a little bit bad version compared to Force of Will. Instead of exiling 1 blue card, you have to exile 2 blue cards, and you can only steal a non-creature spell with this. But if an opponent is casting a demonic tutor, you will actually gain that demonic tutor for 0 mana. Then of course, Submerge. 5 mana to cast and free to cast if an opponent controls a forest. And it's a spot removal and instant speed. Let's talk a little bit about these free to cast instant spells. So Yuriko is giving you a lot of card advantage, drawing you a lot of cards. And if you have a lot of cards in your hand, you might as well have some free to cast spells inside your deck. That might also sacrifice hand size, just like Force of Will. It might be worth, because you can now do more stuff in instant speed with a low amount of lands. The last instant I want to talk about is Vampiric Tutor. So for 1 mana, pay 2 life, put Emrakul on top of your deck, and then Yuriko hits face and draws you a card and flips Emrakul and deal 13 loss of life to all opponents. Pretty good. Also a good way of getting Emrakul into your hand. Sorceries will also be quite easy to put inside your deck and put down into your graveyard. Here are some good examples of sorceries that you could just put inside your deck. A lot of them are just good in general, like Demonic Tutor or Praetor's Grasp. But also, the Taxian Probe can go into any deck. That is blue, of course. Let's proceed with creatures. So what Yuriko actually wants are 1-drops that are somehow unblockable. And then on turn 2, you will attack with this thing and ninja in your commander. So we are gonna need some more variations to this little Naga rogue. Here you have this thing, as Tormented Soul, also unblockable. This one has flying. It also has a cute effect. Whenever you cast a historic spell, we will scry. And there is some historic spell like artifacts inside this deck. This is also a very good card, flying, but you can also sacrifice this to counterspell an instant and sorcery. Or well, they just need to pay 1 mana in this case. But it's a good interaction, something at the very least. We also have this thing, Vault Scourge. Because of the Phyrexian mana, it will actually be a 1-cost creature card that will come into play on turn 1. But one more thing, this is an artifact, giving you both artifact and creature condition filled with Emrakul if this is inside your graveyard. I would also like to mention Mistblade Shinobi, one of the few ninjas that is actually good, and I do hope we will see more ninjas that is gonna be good in the future. Also, we have this thing, sadly not a ninja, would be cool if it was, but we'll make every 1 attack power creature card unblockable, making your commander unblockable, which is kinda cute, because when we are going forward in the game, we're gonna make Yuriko unblockable somehow. Otherwise, she's just gonna run into a blocker and die. And then you basically need to cast this thing, attack with Yuriko once again, and make her unblockable with this thing. And that is a little bit pesky and a bit slow. It's better to have something in play that is making Yuriko unblockable throughout the game. Now we're going over to a little bit more tricky part, artifacts. But it's not that impossible. Let's begin with looking at Mishra's Bubble. For 0 mana, this is a cantrip, because you will draw a card in the next upkeep, and you get to look at the top card of a whatever deck, which is kinda cute. It's good intel, a little bit, and this is putting an artifact inside your graveyard for no cost whatsoever. This is also a good artifact, and I think this is her sword, but well, that's cool lore. In any case, this is a very good interaction. You will attack with some stuff that this is equipped to, gain a lot of shard counters, and you can use those shard counters to kill creature cards that could be potential blockers, giving you the way of moving forward and making sure that Yuriko keeps attacking face. But this is also a very good interaction against combo creature cards, and your opponents are probably gonna destroy this if they wanna be able to win, putting this into your graveyard. But this is actually a good grindy equipment. Sword of Fire and Ice is also a very good grindy equipment, making Yuriko a little bit bigger, unblockable by blue and red creatures, and deal 2 damage to a creature card and draw a card if you hit face. It's a good grindy interactive artifact. Sensei's top auto include in every Yuriko deck. We've already talked about Scroll Rack in the beginning of the video. Soldering will help out hard casting Emrakul. The last card type I'm gonna talk about is Enchantment, and that might also be a little bit tricky, but Mystic Remore is a great example of an enchantment you're always going to auto-include that is gonna be great, because this will eventually end up in your graveyard, because sooner or later, sometime, you're not gonna keep paying the upkeep cost forever. Back to basic. We have only 2 colors, meaning that you could mostly include islands and swamps. Sure, there will be some non-basic lands inside this deck, just don't tap them if you have your back to basic in play. Mana Mace, also a decently good stacks card, preventing players from casting too many spells on the same turn. Arcane Laboratory, AI basically the same, a little bit stronger, costs more mana, but will also deal more loss of life when Yuriko flips it on top of your deck. Search for Ascanta. It's not for everyone. My personal opinion is that I actually like this card, and we have built our deck quite focused at putting a tremendous amount of cards down into your graveyard. Counterbalance, a really cool enchantment for 2 blue mana. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If that card have the same converted mana cost, counter that spell. Now we already included Scroll Rack and Sensei's top, so we are almost playing Legacy Miracle here. Kinda cool. I actually think this is kinda good, because sooner or later you're gonna make that psychological warfare. Treachery. Now I did mention that sooner or later Yuriko is going to run into blockers, so we kinda need to make her unblockable somehow, but this is also a spot removal you could call it, because we're stealing a creature card and untapping all the 5 lands we used to cast this thing. And that is a grindy good way of getting rid of blockers, but also a grindy good way of going to a late game of some sort if you're ending up in a beatdown scenario, which is actually plan A for this deck, to burn your opponents down with flipping top cards of your library from your deck with Yuriko. Threads of Disloyalty is also a smaller version to Treachery. A lower cost will also steal cards, and there is a lot of different cards inside this format that have only power 2, that is good enough at stealing. The last card I want to talk about and mention is Attrition, and this is a little bit strange because we're not really playing a reoccurring reanimator deck like Maren. The trick is this, however: 4 mana, this is what you can do. Begin with 1 black mana, sacrifice a creature, we will sacrifice our commander to destroy target non-black creature card. Go to combat, attack with this. Unblockable, meaning it will go through, then 1 black and 1 blue, 3 mana total. Return this thing to play and flip this up to your hand. This is Commander Ninjutsu. It is bypassing commander tax. And then for the last mana, 1 blue mana, put this creature card back into play. And you have a grindy, annoying thing that you can keep on going that will keep destroying creature cards all over the place. That isn't black, by the way. Attrition might be a little bit too grindy, a little bit too greedy, and a little bit too slow, but I wanted to mention it anyway. Now in the description below of this video you can find a link to a tapped out page that you're currently looking at right now, where you can see the complete deck list for this video. But also any updates that might happen in the future will happen on this tapped out page. Alright, we have reached an end of this video, this Emrakul Tiger Shadow deck take video. Thank you so much for watching it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.